Most men think silence means weakness, but what if the moment you stop chasing is the exact moment a woman starts feeling you the most? Listen carefully, because almost no one explains this truth to men. When a man talks too much, explains too much, texts too much, and reacts to every emotional shift, he unknowingly removes the one thing that creates deep psychological impact: space. Not distance filled with anger, not childish ignoring, but silence that carries presence. You see, attraction is not built only through words. In fact, the female mind often reacts far more intensely to what is not said. Think about it. When a man constantly reassures, constantly explains his feelings, constantly tries to prove himself, the emotional mystery disappears. Everything becomes predictable, safe, comfortable, and comfortable rarely creates deep emotional tension. But when a man suddenly becomes calm, grounded, less reactive, something strange begins to happen inside her mind. Questions appear. Why is he so calm? Why isn't he chasing like before? What is he thinking? And those questions create emotional gravity. The truth is, women are extremely sensitive to emotional shifts, much more than most men realize. They notice tone changes, energy changes, attention changes. When your silence appears suddenly after a pattern of attention, it creates a psychological echo. Your absence begins speaking louder than your words ever did. But here is where most men get it wrong. They try to fake silence as a strategy. They ignore messages while secretly staring at their phone every minute, and they pretend not to care while their mind is drowning in anxiety. Women feel that energy instantly. Real silence doesn't come from manipulation. It comes from emotional stability. A man who is focused on his mission, his growth, his purpose naturally becomes less available for emotional over-explaining. His time becomes valuable. His responses become thoughtful instead of immediate. And this changes the entire emotional dynamic. Because when a man stops reacting instantly, the woman starts reflecting internally. She replays conversations. She rethinks moments. She starts wondering what she might have done differently. And that internal reflection is powerful. Most men chase answers, but emotional connection often grows through unanswered curiosity. That doesn't mean disappearing completely. It means speaking with intention, shorter messages, clearer energy, less emotional panic. When you stop trying to control her perception of you, something unexpected happens. She begins forming her own perception, and the female mind, when left to imagine, often creates far stronger emotional stories than any explanation you could give. This is why silence can feel louder than 1,000 words, because it forces emotion to grow in the space between interactions. Now imagine this. You send fewer messages, but when you speak, your words carry weight. You don't rush to defend yourself. You don't argue over every misunderstanding. You remain calm, and calmness is rare in a world full of emotional reactions. To a woman, a man who is emotionally steady becomes incredibly intriguing, not because he is playing games, but because he cannot be easily shaken. Silence, when it comes from strength, feels different. It doesn't feel cold, it feels powerful, and power creates emotional curiosity. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself endlessly, pause. The next time you feel the urge to chase reassurance, breathe. Because sometimes the moment you stop filling every space with words is the exact moment her mind starts filling that space with thoughts of you. And now I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever noticed that when you stopped chasing, a woman suddenly started paying more attention? Comment your experience below. I read every single one. And if this perspective opened your eyes even a little, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this truth today. There is a moment that almost every man experiences, but very few truly understand. It happens when you stop trying so hard. Not because you are playing games, not because you are angry, but because something inside you quietly shifts. You stop sending the extra message. You stop checking if she replied every 5 minutes. You stop trying to keep the conversation alive by yourself, and suddenly the energy changes. What most men don't realize is that constant availability slowly removes emotional tension. When someone knows you will always be there, always respond instantly, always reassure them, your presence becomes predictable. And the human mind, especially in relationships, rarely feels intensity around things that feel guaranteed. But silence breaks that pattern. When a man who was once highly attentive becomes calmer and less reactive, it creates a subtle emotional disturbance in her mind. Not fear, not panic, curiosity. Her brain begins searching for answers. Did something change? Is he losing interest? Is he focusing on something else? And that curiosity begins pulling her attention back toward you. This isn't manipulation. It is simply how human psychology works. People value what feels meaningful, and meaningful things rarely feel effortless to obtain. When a man constantly pushes attention toward a woman, she receives it without needing to move emotionally. But when that stream of attention slows down, she suddenly becomes aware of the space where it used to be, and that space starts echoing. Women often process emotions internally before expressing them outwardly. They replay moments. They revisit conversations. They analyze tone, timing, and behavior. Your silence becomes part of that internal story. She may remember the way you laughed during a conversation. She may remember something thoughtful you once said. She may remember a moment when you understood her better than others. And now, without constant distraction from messages or explanations, those memories become louder. Men often believe attraction grows through constant effort, but emotional impact often grows through contrast. Light feels brighter after darkness. Warmth feels stronger after cold. And attention feels more valuable when it isn't endless. This is why the man who can remain calm, composed, and slightly mysterious often creates deeper emotional curiosity than the man who constantly tries to prove his value. Because proof is loud, but confidence is quiet. And quiet confidence creates emotional gravity. Think about the men who naturally attract attention without speaking much. They aren't begging for approval. They aren't explaining their worth. They simply exist with a certain calm certainty. Women feel that energy not because they are calculating it logically, but because emotionally, stability feels powerful. And when you begin focusing on your life instead of constantly managing her emotions, something interesting happens. Your energy becomes more grounded. You start investing time into things that build you. Your work, your health, your goals, your friendships. Your world becomes larger than the relationship dynamic. And women notice that a man who has a full life creates a different kind of attraction. His attention becomes meaningful because it is chosen, not given out of desperation. So when your silence appears, it doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like independence. And independence is magnetic. But remember something important. Silence only works when it comes from inner strength. If it comes from resentment, insecurity, or passive aggression, women feel that immediately. The goal is not to withdraw love or care. The goal is to stop over-explaining your value, because the strongest presence a man can carry is quiet certainty. Certainty in who he is, certainty in what he stands for, certainty that he doesn't need to chase approval to be worthy. And when a woman senses that kind of inner calm, her emotional radar turns toward you naturally, not because you forced it, but because you stopped trying to force it. Now think honestly about your own experience. Have you ever noticed that the moment you stopped texting first all the time, she suddenly started reaching out? Tell me the truth in the comments. And if this perspective is helping you see relationship dynamics in a new way, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and share it with a friend who keeps over-chasing without realizing the impact it has. Here is the truth most men never hear. A woman does not always feel the weight of your presence while you are constantly giving it. She often feels it when it's gone. Not forever, not dramatically, but just long enough for her mind to notice the difference. Because human emotions work through contrast. When something is always there, The brain adapts and becomes normal, expected. But the moment that pattern changes, attention wakes up. Imagine a man who used to reply instantly, always ready to talk, always explaining his thoughts, always trying to keep the connection alive. His energy is everywhere, filling every silence before it even exists. At first, that attention may feel comforting to her, but over time, something subtle happens. She stops needing to move toward you emotionally because you are always moving toward her. And when one person does all the emotional movement, the balance quietly shifts. But the moment you slow down, something powerful begins inside her mind. She starts noticing the quiet. The phone lights up less often. The long explanations disappear. The emotional reassurance isn't constantly being offered. And suddenly, she feels something she didn't feel before. The space you left behind. That space becomes emotional pressure because now she has room to think. She might open your chat and scroll through old messages. She might remember the way you listened when she was stressed. She might even wonder if you are giving that attention to someone else now. Not because she is insecure, but because the human brain naturally tries to understand change, and change creates attention. But here is the deeper psychological truth. Silence allows a woman to feel her own emotions instead of reacting to yours. When a man constantly explains how much he cares, constantly tells her what she means to him, constantly seeks reassurance, her emotional focus shifts toward managing his feelings. But when that noise disappears, her attention returns to her own feelings. And that is where real emotional awareness begins. She starts asking herself questions she didn't ask before. Do I miss him? Why does his absence feel strange? Why do I keep thinking about him? These questions are powerful because they come from her mind, not from your persuasion. You see, attraction that is discovered feels stronger than attraction that is constantly being presented. When a woman arrives at her feelings on her own, they feel real to her, and silence often creates the space for that discovery. But let's be clear about something important. Silence does not mean disappearing out of bitterness. It doesn't mean punishing someone with cold behavior. Real silence is calm. It is the quiet confidence of a man who does not feel the need to constantly perform for validation. A man who knows his value doesn't need to remind someone of it every day. He simply lives his life. He speaks when he has something meaningful to say. He listens more than he explains. He moves with patience instead of emotional urgency, and patience has a strange effect on people. In a world where everyone rushes to be seen, heard, and validated, the person who remains steady and quiet begins to stand out. Because calmness feels rare. Think about it. When someone argues loudly, tries to win every conversation, and pushes for constant reassurance, it often feels heavy. But when someone remains composed, thoughtful, and emotionally stable, their presence feels different. It feels grounded, and grounding energy creates trust. Women often feel safest around men who cannot be easily shaken by emotional waves. Not because those men are distant, but because they are stable. Silence, when it comes from stability, sends a message without words. It says, I respect myself, I respect my time, I don't need to chase to be valuable. And that message is powerful because deep down, people are naturally drawn to those who feel complete on their own. Now, I want you to reflect honestly. Have you ever noticed that the more you tried to prove your value to someone, the less they seemed to appreciate it? But the moment you pulled back and focused on yourself, their attitude changed. Tell me if you've experienced that. Write yes or share your story in the comments. And if this video is making you see relationships from a deeper perspective, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who needs to stop chasing and start understanding the real psychology behind attraction. Most men misunderstand silence because they think it's about control, but the real power of silence has nothing to do with controlling a woman. It has everything to do with controlling yourself. The truth is, many men talk too much when they feel uncertain. They explain their intentions, justify their actions, defend their character, and try to clear every possible misunderstanding immediately. It feels logical. If she understands you, the problem will disappear, right? But emotions rarely work that way. When a man rushes to explain everything, he unknowingly removes emotional tension before it has a chance to settle. He tries to fix feelings with words, yet many feelings need time, not explanations. And this is where silence becomes powerful. When you resist the urge to react instantly, something shifts inside the emotional dynamic. Instead of pushing your thoughts into the moment, you allow space for emotions to breathe. That pause changes how a woman processes the situation. Think about how most arguments happen. One person reacts quickly, the other reacts even faster. Words become sharper, emotions rise. Suddenly, the conversation isn't about understanding anymore. It's about winning. But a calm man breaks that pattern. When she expects an emotional reaction and instead finds quiet composure, her mind slows down. Your silence forces the moment to settle. And in that calm space, something interesting happens. She begins thinking instead of reacting. Women are highly perceptive when it comes to emotional energy. They notice the difference between a man who is suppressing anger and a man who is simply grounded. The first feels tense. The second feels steady. And steadiness is deeply attractive because it signals emotional maturity. A man who can sit in silence without panic shows that he does not depend on constant validation. He doesn't need every conversation to end with reassurance. He trusts himself enough to allow uncertainty to exist. That level of self-trust is rare. Most people rush to remove discomfort. They want immediate clarity, immediate answers, immediate emotional relief. But patience carries a different kind of strength. When you are comfortable with silence, it shows that you are comfortable with yourself. You are not scrambling for approval. You are not chasing constant attention. You are simply present, and presence is powerful. There is another layer to this that many men never notice. Silence also reveals truth. When you stop filling every moment with words, people show you who they really are. Some will step closer, some will step away. Some will reveal emotions they were hiding. But without the noise of constant communication, reality becomes clearer. This clarity protects you. Instead of trying to convince someone to care, you observe whether they choose to. Instead of forcing emotional connection, you allow it to grow naturally. And that shift changes everything. Because the strongest position a man can hold in any relationship is quiet self-respect. A man who respects himself does not beg for attention. He does not argue endlessly to prove his worth. He does not chase someone who is unsure about him. He simply steps back and lets actions reveal the truth. This doesn't mean he stops caring. It means he stops overextending his care to people who are not matching his energy. And when a woman senses that you are capable of walking away from emotional chaos without losing your composure, something happens deep in her perception of you. You become someone she cannot easily manipulate emotionally. You become someone she cannot easily predict. But more importantly, you become someone she begins to respect. Respect is the quiet foundation of attraction. Without it, attention fades quickly. With it, even your silence carries weight because a respected man does not need to say much. His calm speaks for him. Now, I want you to be honest with yourself. In your past relationships, did talking more actually solve problems? Or did it sometimes make the situation even more complicated? Share your experience in the comments. And if this message is resonating with you, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and send it to a friend who keeps trying to fix everything with words instead of understanding the deeper psychology behind silence. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes something uncomfortable. Talking more doesn't always make someone value you more. In fact, sometimes the more you explain yourself, the less people truly listen, because value is not created through endless words. Value is felt through presence, boundaries, and emotional stability. And silence is where those qualities begin to show. When you stop filling every moment with reassurance, explanations, and emotional chasing, you begin to reclaim something many men lose in relationships, your center. You stop orbiting around someone else's reactions. You stop measuring your worth based on how quickly they respond or how warmly they reply. Instead, your focus returns to your own life, your goals, your direction, your growth. And this is where the deeper transformation happens, because the most attractive version of a man is not the one who tries the hardest to keep someone's attention. It is the man who lives a life that naturally commands attention. Think about it. A man who is constantly checking his phone, constantly adjusting his behavior to avoid losing someone, constantly explaining himself, slowly becomes smaller in his own world. His emotional energy becomes centered on someone else's approval. But the man who learns to be comfortable with silence begins to expand again. He invests in his health. He builds his ambitions. He strengthens his mindset. He surrounds himself with purpose, and suddenly his attention becomes valuable again, not because he is withholding it, but because it now comes from a full life. Women feel that difference instantly. A man with purpose moves differently. His words are fewer, but they carry clarity. His presence is calm because his identity does not depend on someone else's validation. And when that kind of man becomes silent, it doesn't feel like insecurity. It feels like strength because everyone senses that his life continues moving forward. Whether someone stays or leaves, that quiet independence is powerful. It shifts the entire emotional dynamic. Instead of asking, how do I keep her interested? The question becomes, does this connection add value to my life? And that shift in mindset changes everything. Because when you start valuing your time and energy, other people begin valuing it too. Not because you demanded respect, but because your behavior naturally reflects it. Silence becomes a filter. The right people will lean closer, curious about your calm presence. The wrong people will drift away, uncomfortable with a man they cannot easily control emotionally. Either outcome is clarity, and clarity protects your peace. At the end of the day, the goal was never to make a woman feel confused or uncertain. The goal is to become a man who does not need constant noise to feel secure in himself. A man whose quiet confidence speaks louder than his explanations. A man whose life continues moving forward regardless of who chooses to walk beside him. And ironically, that is often the man women feel the deepest emotional pull toward. Not because he begged for attention, but because he never needed to. Now, I want to leave you with a question that might reveal more than you expect. Think back to the last time a woman started showing more interest in you. Be honest with yourself. Were you chasing her harder at that moment, or were you more focused on your own life and speaking less? Write your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your experience. And if this video gave you a new way to understand female psychology and relationship dynamics, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who needs to stop over-explaining his worth and start standing in quiet confidence.